Well, Leslie Vernick, who I found doing a Google search as one of the top female Christian counselors in the whole USA. She's at least top 5 on Google. She had some thoughts on a recent podcast of what a godly woman really looks like. And she says many Christians have a certain image of what a godly woman looks like, how she behaves, what her priorities are, her husband being at the top of the list. She says a godly woman is God-centered, not self-centered or others-centered. Our love for God has to be first. Being a godly woman does not mean living around your husband. That is actually idolatry. That's actually idolatry. Let's take a listen to what Leslie says on a recent podcast here.
In the storms of life. And therefore, in order to be a godly woman, we have to reorient our loves. It doesn't mean that we can't love other people or other things or even love ourselves. But our love for God has to be first. And I find that many women that I work with, Christian women, good women, think that a godly woman means I put my husband first and I center myself around what he needs and what he wants and what he says. And that's actually idolatry. It's putting your husband in God's place in your life or other people. I need them to approve of me in order to be okay. No, you don't. If you're a godly woman and you're God-centered, then you take your directions from him, and that means...
So, you don't take your directions from your husband or anybody else. You take your directions from God. And what did God say? What did God say in His Word to us? And especially to women? You know what God said. You know what God said. Submit to your own husbands in everything. Respect your husbands. Win him over without a word. Win him over with your reverent deeds. That is what God has clearly spoken to the wife. When I first heard this, though, I thought, my goodness, where are all these women making an idol out of serving their husband? I mean, where are they? Where are these women at? I would like to. I'm almost 40 years old. I've traveled to 8 different countries. I have lived all over the United States, and I've never met a woman who I thought, after being around her, observing her, who I thought, wow, that woman is making an idol out of her man, out of her husband. I've never thought that. I have never once thought that. I've seen women make an idol out of getting married. I've seen women make an idol out of the wedding day. I did a video on a woman who, they've been waiting for 5, 6, 7 years to get married because the woman needed a $40,000 wedding and her fiance was still trying to save up to give her the perfect day. So I've seen that. I've seen that idolize. I haven't ever seen a woman make an idol out of serving her husband, though. Now, this is an interesting topic, though, this topic of making an idol out of serving your husband, because first, I don't think that even exists in the feminist world that we live in today. I don't think that exists. And feminism is the air that we breathe in our society, so I don't think that would be. But secondly, I think this is interesting because every church men's group that I've ever been to, any men's meeting, any things like that, I've heard the same thing repeated. I can't even count how many times I've heard the same thing repeated. And the thing that's repeated over and over and over again is God's number 1 and your wife is number 2. And then, your kids, your job, church responsibilities, maybe hobbies are in there somewhere, way down the line, whatever, right? Which basically translates to, in all actuality, it translates to that your wife is number 1, right? That means your servant leader. Servant leader, serve her, which means, as Mark Driscoll told us, another video I did, as Mark Driscoll says, do whatever she wants. That's what it means. Servant leader, do whatever she wants. That's basically what it means. That's what it boils down to. But this is interesting, though. This is very interesting. I asked a good friend of mine who is a godly woman, who is a wife and a mother, and volunteers and is a part of all kinds of women's ministry stuff at church. I mean, she's done it for years. She's been in all these different groups. And I asked her a very specific question. I said, hey, How many times have you heard it taught in all these women's ministry things that you've been to? How many times have you heard it taught that God is number one and husband is number two? So how many times have you heard that taught? She thought about it for a minute and she said, I don't think I've ever heard that taught. Isn't that fascinating? I asked my wife the same question. She's been to a few, women's retreats, women's meetings, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. How many times have you heard that? She said the same thing. She hasn't heard it. She hasn't heard it taught. Now, isn't that fascinating? Now, why is that? Why is that? Because the fundamental tenet of feminism is that you don't defer to a man. You don't defer to a man, ever. You are strong. You're independent. I am woman, hear me roar. That is a fundamental tenet of feminism. And again, feminism is the air we breathe. It's the air we breathe. There's a women's conference coming up at my church. And I go to a conservative church. I looked at the list of topics. You know what topic wasn't on there? Anything to do with husbands submitting to a husband, the husband being the head of the home. Why? Why is that? Why is that? Because feminism is the air we breathe, and that would not be allowed. I mean, come on. Now, to my fellow patriarchs out there, what do you think of this? Give me a like, subscribe, give me a comment. I need some comments here about this. Anybody have any experience with this? Well, Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Post Millennial Man.